Okay, you're recording. There we go.
Great. I'll just go ahead and jump in. Good afternoon, everyone, if those of you in the central time zone and above. I'm Bob, and I work here in the Microsoft Solutions team at TechStar. Along with Jamil and Navi, we work on the account management side of the Microsoft Solutions team. And I want to encourage you to make this an interactive webinar today. So the more interactive, the better. So feel free to come off mute and ask a question, or you can click raise your hand, which is a new feature of Teams. If you're not familiar with that, you can let us know through the chat. Or so you can chat, you can raise your hand, or you can come off mute. So the raise your hand button is something that we're going to watch pretty closely, or anyone that does a chat. And we'll try and watch those incoming comments as quickly as possible. As Mike said, we are recording today, and that recording will be provided once the survey is complete. Very short survey. So just a bit about TechStar. We are a premier Microsoft Solutions partner. We are a go-to for Power BI solutions. So they very often will come to us and ask us to help deploy or maximize the investment that clients have made in this technology. And you're getting a piece of our expertise today. We're happy to demonstrate that. Mike actually, for those of you that may have joined early, the webinar was actually created out of something called a customer immersion experience, which is a formal course from Microsoft that we deliver. Mike actually delivers many of those, he's been working at Microsoft for 18 years. He's delivered so many of those CIEs, the customer immersion experiences, that he's been certified a rock star by Microsoft. So you've got royalty in your midst. We won't. But the CIEs are usually limited to the amount of students, where we provide each student a virtual desktop. So we took a step back and say, okay, how can we open this up to the masses? Because we've been getting sometimes 40 to 60 attendees at these webinars. So we wanted to open it up for everyone. So Mike has kind of morphed the information from a formal CIE to put it into a webinar. And we've also condensed it down. They can usually go anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. They're very intense, but very valuable for those clients that want it. So I've mentioned the Rockstar and the associated CIEs. So that's about it for the commercial. I'll wrap up at the end. Again, if you want to raise your hand, do a chat, or come off mute, we're happy to make this as interactive as possible. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
I was wondering why you wanted to do the intro up front, and now I know it was because you wanted to throw in the Rockstar thing. And as a rock star, I expect no brown M&Ms in my dressing room. For those of you that are into rock history, you know what that reference is. Anyway, welcome. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it so much. I'm not even going to spend any more time. I'm going to dive right in. I do have some kind of preference stuff, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. That's me down at the bottom. I'm the Director of Cloud Solutions here at TechStar. And there is my contact information. And I will send this again in video form too. So you'll have this along with my phone number. I am always talking to people who attend my sessions. And I'm not your product support. So I got to clarify that, because you'll kill me with hundreds of thousands of product support requests. I can't do that for you, but I can absolutely talk to you about where Microsoft is going and what's happening. As Bob mentioned, I was at Microsoft for almost 2 decades and still have tons of friends and still stay tightly connected. And as I sent you all an update today, an email, I was telling you, I just changed this presentation because a lot is changing for Microsoft. So you're getting literally up to the minute info in today's session. And again, Bob mentioned these used to be 3 hours. We're only going to go 90 minutes today, but it will be a jam-packed 90 minutes. So buckle up and get ready. Real quickly, as Bob mentioned, TechStar has been in business. I just want to pull out the fact we specialize in consulting services, app development, training, cloud deployments, and technical staffing. And I made the consulting services in blue because what we do in consulting services is that little graph. Azure, data analytics, collaboration, business process. We do lifts and shifts and disaster recovery stuff. I'll send this to you. I'm not going to waste any more of your time on that. We have worldwide offices all over. And here's the crazy thing. Most people don't realize we have 1,500 employees worldwide. And someone had said to me the other day, you're like the best kept secret. And we have some very humble owners who don't brag about themselves, but we're a very large organization. And I know this says 900. This is an old slide. We're now at 1,500 as of 2020. So anyway, let's talk about the Power Platform. And you're saying, wait a minute, this is a Power BI session. Well, it is. But as I mentioned in my email, for those of you that got my email today, Microsoft has totally changed Power BI, and they've moved it under the Microsoft Dynamics business unit. If you're not familiar with Dynamics, Dynamics is all the accounting packages, the finance packages, CRM is under the Dynamics umbrella. And Microsoft has now moved Power BI, the entire group, over in there, and they've put it into this new product that they're calling the Power Platform. Now, this has been around for a little bit, but as typical Microsoft sessions go, and I apologize, I'm going to cough. Okay, had to hit that microphone so you didn't blow your ears out. But as typical Microsoft does, they change the names and they flip things around. And so, for example, it used to be Power Apps and Flow. Now it's called Power Apps and Power Automate. You don't have to worry about all that. Just understand that Power BI is part of a much larger continuum of products that's out designed to do all of your analytics. And I have over the side here, Power BI Desktop, Power BI Embedded, Power BI Mobile, and Power BI as a Service are all new forms of the Power BI platform. We especially drive out Power BI, so we do a webinar just on Power BI. We also have a webinar on the entire platform. So you can see Power Apps, Power Automate. That's next week. And we also have another one on process mining. Now, Microsoft announced just the other day that they're working on a process mining product, but they don't have it out yet. And they have not announced when they're going to have it out, which makes me think it's not coming anytime soon. Process mining is a big part of this piece. And TechStar has a process mining product that works right in the Microsoft stack. Actually, we're trying to get Microsoft interested. Maybe they'll buy it or acquire it or get the license to it or whatever. But we do have a process mining tool called Vive, and we're running webinars on Vive as well. And people are really intrigued because it fits that kind of missing piece. But I did want to call out that Microsoft has made mention that they hope to have a process mining tool. They don't know when they will have it, but that will kind of fit this Power Platform quadfecta or whatever 5 is above that. The other thing I want to talk about is the data connectors, the AI building, and the common data services. These are all unified utilities. If you're a developer, you can think of them as APIs that can be called and utilized within all of these products. And this common data service is going to be a huge part of it. I'll come back and explain this in just a little bit as it relates to Power BI, but I want to get into demo as fast as possible and not bore you to death with a bunch of slides, since I told you that's what I was going to do. So let's just jump ahead. These are the different vertical stacks. You don't have to worry about it. Again, you're going to get this deck and you can look at all this with notes and stuff later. But let's talk about what Power BI is. And I think this is the last slide before I have it. We go full demo. But really, you break it down from Microsoft's perspective in how do you get your data? How do you transform your data, analyze it, visualize it, and then publish it? That's the goal of what Power BI is. And specifically, they want to be able to do that on any device. Doesn't matter if you have Android, doesn't matter if you have Mac or PC, Windows, whatever the case, Microsoft wants you to be able to consume that data and build those dashboards and get them out. I worked at Microsoft, as I mentioned, almost 2 decades, and I was actually a financial controller for the central region of Microsoft for a while. And that's important only from the standpoint that, I have sat in many of your shoes, and I've been responsible for delivering financial data and analysis to the executives of Microsoft. I did it for almost 12 years. So I have real world experience, not just book smart, using of this stuff. And where they've taken this product is absolutely amazing. I'm going to ask you, we're going to do a little trivia real quick, and I want you to use your chat session and just chat out what you think. I put down here, there's 270 developers who are currently working on the Power BI product since 2018. So this is almost, 2-3 years ago. So 270 developers. My question to you is, to put that into perspective, how many developers do you think work on Word and Excel? Each of the teams, like the Excel team, how many developers at Microsoft are currently working on Excel? And we'll put that into perspective about how many are working, developers are working on Power BI. Use your chat, just take some guesses, and let's see who comes close.
75, 15, about 50, 75, 20.
20, and we're getting closer. The answer is actually only 10 to 12 developers total work on Microsoft Excel or Word or PowerPoint or any of those products. They usually keep the teams really small, really nimble. So to have 270 developers working on Power BI signifies where Microsoft's putting their money. This product is the future. It is everything that Microsoft is pushing forward under this new CEO. Satya Nadella, he's totally into this, and he's putting his resources and money and time into it. That's good news and bad news. It's great news because the product just keeps getting better and better every single month. It's bad news because the product keeps getting better every single month. If you go on vacation and come back, you're going to come back to a totally different version of Power BI. It's changing so fast. They're literally sending out updates every couple of weeks.
Hey, Mike, one of our participants, Mike York, wants everyone to know that he won. He was the closest.
He was the closest. Who was that? I want to give him full credit.
Mike York.
Mike York, you have just won 1 million imaginary points. So please spend those wisely because that's incredible. No, good job. And that is usually people guess huge teams. They're really, really small. Today, we're going to be using a database that I actually built. And I didn't just build a database. I built a program to build databases. So the original data sample from Microsoft this was 3-4 years ago, their corporate enterprise database was 80 records, which is ridiculous. And I told Microsoft that. We need a huge database. So we're going to have almost 1 million records. I use the analogy of a shoe store. Why? Because when I first started teaching classes, when we actually people pay us to come in and do a full day hands-on classes with this stuff, it's hard for me to talk about your business without knowing all the stuff. And one of the first ones I did was in petroleum, and I don't know which pipe fits with which nut, which goes into which, gangly wrench, et cetera, et cetera. And so I finally said, let's just do shoes because everyone understands shoes have colors. They have a type of shoe, a style of shoe. They have a size and a width. And so I don't have to explain that. You all understand that. So I created this program that builds the sample database, and I built in 20 different Easter eggs in the data. What does that mean? It means I made the data respond to real world events. Could be a weather event, could be a fire in the warehouse, it could be whatever the case may be. You just don't know, but that's all in the data we're going to use today. And so what I'm trying to teach you is how we use analytics to find data that's buried so deep. And I'm going to show you the tools and the processes and the ways in which we can get in there and do that. So let's get that done. And I say demo, it's pretty much the rest of the day is going to be a demo. So let's dive over here, and I'm going to open up Microsoft Power BI. You're free to play along, but it's probably best if you just watch for a little bit because I'm going to be moving at a pretty fast rate in order to get this done. With Power BI, when we go up here and you start, let's say if I want to create a brand new Power BI. So if I was loading it, you'll see this little yellow window pop up for the very first time as it initiates the window. And then it comes up with this screen. And the screen is really important for a couple of reasons. Number one is always the what's new. And remember what I said, with 270 plus developers, it's always new, like every single week. So constantly be checking this because there are absolutely brand new features that they're adding on any given week. There's blogs and forums where you can keep up to date. There's videos that are out there that'll train you how to do a lot of the Power BI stuff. And then as well as tutorials to see guided learning, how to get started. Here's all the sample databases. So if you wanted to play along right now, I'm not going to take the time to send you my data, but if you want to click and download a sample, when I click here, it'll take me out to the site and it has retail samples. Here's a COVID-19 US sample that's brand new. I'm sure that's real data from COVID-19 that you can play around with, human resources, IT spend, retail, et cetera. So pick the one that aligns with you best and it'll actually download all the data and you can start playing around with it as we go. But for this particular class, we're going to use that database that I came up with. So once this comes up, you'll notice the first thing we're probably going to want to do is hit that get data, because we want to link our Power BI into our database. Now, if I forget to do that and I click off this screen, you'll notice the very first command that you can do is get data. So Microsoft's pretty sure at some point we're going to have to connect to some data. When I click this, it breaks it out into some commonly used ones. So here's Excel, Power BI data sets, data flows, SQL Server, et cetera, et cetera. If I click on more, you're going to find that there are hundreds of data connectors already published for Microsoft. Things like Oracle, IBM, DB2, MySQL, SAP, all the Amazon tools are out here. Snowflake, relatively new, blob storage in Amazon. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And so you can cut right to what you want. I know that I want to do a database and I want it to be Microsoft Access, for example. I can click Access Database or whatever, and it'll load the connectors that allow you to connect straight into this. When I first did this, I had it attached to a SQL database, and so we're logging into a SQL database, and then I did it as an Access database to show it as a local file. Today, I'm going to be showing it to you as just an Excel file, just to make life simple. So I'm going to connect to an Excel file, and I could connect to any of those. It really doesn't matter. I've got one on my table here called MasterDB. It's on my standard desktop, which I should have cleaned before the event today, but that's okay. And so up pops up. Now it's opening Microsoft Excel, and it's opening all the tables inside of Microsoft Excel. And I'm seeing two different things here. Down here at the bottom, these are actually the tabs that include the colors, relational, reps, and stores. Those are the four sets of data that I want. As I click on them, you can see the actual data coming in. Here's all the reps and which stores they work out of. Here are the colors of the shoes and which color family. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then I have this thing called relational. This is the actual sales itself. Now this is, even though it's an Excel is a flat file database. I want to bring this in as a relational database, because you'll see that I don't, in this, the listing of the sales, I don't actually say which store it is. I just reference the store ID. And so if I come down, you know, this is store number 1, and if I go down 100,000 records, it'll be store number 22 or something. Well, if I go look over at the stores table and go down to number 22, there aren't 22 stores. So let's say Charlotte, number 6. If it had said 6 is the store ID, I would know it was Charlotte. I would know it was in the Southwest or Southeast region, its address, who the store manager is, all that info is built in there. So that's a relation. I'm relating the stores table back to all of my sales. The reason these are doubled up, by the way, is because Excel also has named ranges. And if you've ever worked inside of Excel, and it's kind of an advanced topic, but you can name all the ranges inside your cell. And so when you create a database inside of Excel, it will give you a named range. So you'll see colors, relational, reps too. It's the same data. So if I click on reps here, you'll see it has the exact same data as what the page called reps has. I only need one copy, so I'm going to pick these 4. Now, I could easily click load, and it will pull this into my Power BI model. But one of the things I want to do, remember this was a flat file database and I was making it relational. So I use this term relational. I don't want that. I want to change that name to something that makes a little more sense. It's my sales database. So I'm going to transform the data as I bring it into Power BI. And this is actually a pretty huge thing that's happening right now. What's occurring is this brand new Power Query editor has opened up. It's not Excel, even though it works inside of Excel the exact same way as it works in Power BI. And what it is it's kind of an interim placeholder that's going to help me build a data cube. Well, what I want to do, I'm going to make some changes real quick. For example, I don't want this table to be called relational. I want it to be called sales. So I'm just going to right click and rename it. And I'm going to say it is sales, and hit enter, and it's all good, and it'll change the name of the table now to sales. Now, what's cool about this interim data connector that we're doing here is this is sitting outside of my database. And what that means is the data that I have here, as I play with it and as I change it, as I move it around and do stuff, never touches the original database. That's the key part. Your IT department does not want you to have write access to the database when you're doing analytic stuff, because you may delete and change and spin and everything else, and you may actually wipe out the original database. They will give you read access, but they won't give you write access. So what Microsoft does is they use this Power Query editor as a holder. It creates a data cube, and I can change this as much as I want, and it'll change it, and then it will go back and not change the data behind it. So any changes I make here are not going to affect the existing data. For example, here's the brands. And if I go up to brands, I want to do the same thing. I'm going to rename this, for example. I want to call this manufacturing brands. Manufacturing brands. So it's the brand of shoe, basically. So I hit enter and it says manufacturing brand. Well, notice what's happening also over to the right here where it says applied steps. You'll notice source, navigation, promoted headers, change type, renamed columns. So everything I do in here as I make changes, it is going to apply these steps as if it was like an Excel macro recorder. The reason it's doing that is because what's going to happen when I finally build this report, it takes me all week long. I give it to Bob. Bob says, this is great. Now can you update it for the next month? And I got to go back and I got to do it again. Well, with this Power Query, it records these steps and allows me to actually save this process so that next month when all the data has been refreshed and now I have September's data coming in, I don't have to rebuild it. I simply load this up and tell it to run through these applied steps. And there can be thousands of steps here. And literally you just say go and it'll rename this, it'll change this to an integer, it'll make sure this is in date format. Anything you want it to do, all those recorded steps get done in the blink of an eye. When I worked at Microsoft, it would take me a week to prepare just to get the data correct enough that we could actually make reports off it. And a week goes by and now I've got another week and then suddenly the new data is coming in and I got to start all over. When I discovered this and I understood these steps that you can now save, you save the applied steps and reapply them next month. And it takes a process that takes about 5 full working days, so 40 hours a week. Is saved just by loading up the model and saying reapply all these steps. And now I get my new data coming in, which includes September data, but it updates all of this. I'm going to pause for a second, make sure that makes sense for everybody in what we're doing. Any questions on that? I'm also cheating and getting a drink. Okay, I want to go back for 1 second.
Yeah, I do have a question.
I'm sorry, there will be no questions today. No, I'm just kidding.
So if it creates a recording and it goes through that entire process, so could it be triggered by automatic updates in the database, or do you set for it to automatically update at a specific time?
Oh, that was a great question. So, because it's a huge question, there's actually a lot going on there. So the answer is, if we wanted to, when I go up here, you can see once I get this done, I'm going to hit close and apply, or I could just apply, or I could close it. But I could also go in and I can save the different information that I have in here, my settings. I could save these applied steps. This is actually written out almost like a text script that I can load in at any other time I want to. So it's basically, it writes it out as XML code in essence. And so next month comes, I'm now ready to incorporate my data. I go ahead and get my data using the same 4 tables, but before I do anything, I'll import this XML script on top of it and say run it, and it instantly runs it all back together and puts it right back to where I had it before, if that makes sense, but using the new data. To explain why that's an even bigger question, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint for just a second to show this. So you remember this graph, and I told you that they had these data connectors and AI Builder, and this thing called the Common Data Service. What Microsoft is doing, once they move this under Dynamics, is they've created something called a Common Data Service. The Common Data Service looks exactly like this Power Query editor. it is going to build a data object that is separate from your database, so you can't screw it up, right? You can play with it all day long, you can edit it, you can modify it. It's going to optimize it so that you have really fast reads and writes, so you're not waiting on the backend database to do this. So it's basically building you a data cube, and it's giving you all the database capability without you having to, let's say I wanted to share this with my team. I don't want my team necessarily to have rights to go out to SQL Server, right? They shouldn't even know SQL Server exists. I don't want them, or Oracle or a DB2 or anything else. So what it does, what this common data service does, is it's doing exactly what I'm just showing you right now, but it's building this third-party data object. And the difference between this and this, what you're seeing here, there's really very little difference, except this one is much more optimized. It has much more data connections that it can pull information from. But bigger than all that is this will allow you to connect literally to anything Microsoft's doing. They've created a single database object that now works not only with Power BI, but Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, Dynamics, Accounting, CRM. Basically, the entire family uses a similar common data service. Think of it as like MySQL. It's just this version of database that works out there. It can connect to anything on the back end. So let me give you a real life example. I bought a company and they used Oracle, and I want to take their Oracle data and merge it in with my SQL data. And when I run a query or build an object, I want those two data tables to come together as one. That's what this common data service will do. And once this object is available, I can hand the object out to everyone and not worry about anyone violating the integrity of my database. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. This is fairly new. Microsoft just really got going on common data services just in the last 6 months or so.
And that data service is already a part of the Power BI.
It is. So you would connect to it as a specialized deal. Now, I will tell you honestly, Microsoft has some work to make it a smooth connection. You have to jump through some hoops by opening up and saying, get data, get a common data service, and then it's going to ask you for an API, and you have to go back. It's just kludgy right now. Again, because this is so new, but very shortly, within the next month or two, it'll be just like you want to hit an Excel file. You'll say, I want a common data service. Now, Microsoft charges for their common data service, so it is a paid service. However, Microsoft also, I lost my PowerPoint there. Microsoft also provides a license for common data service inside of your Office 365 subscription. So E1, E3, E5 licenses and their various forms all have a modified version that has the common data service in there, so you don't have to buy an extra license. There are some upgrades, though. If you want different types of data connections and other stuff, they will sell you a higher end version. But for general use on standardized database information, similar like what you're using in Power BI, it comes as part of your Office 365 license.
Hey, Michael, quick question.
Uh-huh.
So basically you're saying with this Power BI, it's only having a kind of a read access to the backend databases or Excel or whatsoever, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, its intention is to obfuscate the database itself from the data, because Microsoft wants you to go in there and start really ripping it apart and tearing it up. You're going to see we're going to make calculated columns. We're going to create measures. We're going to use DAX and M and R formulas to do all these wild things. You don't want that touching your original source data. So they kind of firewall it by building this data cube, and common data service is a part of that. The other thing I wanted to mention too, I apologize, I forgot. You had asked me on the first question if I had to run it. In other words, I had to run those steps, or if it could be done automatically by using a common data service. And because common data service now works with Power Apps and Power Automate, you actually in Power BI can fully automate it so that you can run it on a timer. You can run it when an event happens. I can even set up a trigger that says when I email to say refresh data, it'll read the email and fire it off. That's super advanced, but that's what Microsoft's doing by building this platform the way you see here, is they now allow you full automation across all these tools to now be running and generating these analytics.
Okay, thank you.
How's that for a really long answer to a fairly simple question? But I want
No,
you all to
but
understand.
it does make sense. Yeah, it does make sense, and it makes sense if it's creating that common data service, sort of as that interim way to sort of mold and manipulate the data. So that does make sense.
Yeah, it's really a great idea. I've been involved with Power BI for, I don't even know, when it wasn't even Power BI at Microsoft. I was on that team early on. I love it. They're going in the right direction, and I don't always say that about Microsoft products. I will criticize them when they make some really bad mistakes. You can feel free. I'm going to tell you what I feel. But in this particular case, I'm super excited. There's just some really cool stuff that they're putting in, and originally everyone's like, oh, they're going after Tableau, right? Well, first and foremost, Power BI has been around for, a really long time, and I would argue they're just as good as Tableau. But the truth of the matter is, with 270 developers working, they are blowing by Tableau the same way Teams is now kind of blowing by whatever the Teams competitor is. I totally forgot now. But anyway, I think Microsoft's just putting money and time and effort into this thing, and it's truly paying off. So that's what that common data service is. It's just another data connector that we can use. But I wanted you to see here, it's called Power Query Editor, but eventually I think they'll kind of morph off Power Query and they'll all standardize on common data, and it should have very much the same features. I'm gonna go ahead and say, let's apply this, let's close this out, and now it's gonna start pulling in all these records into my database. Now remember, this is almost 1 million records, so it's gonna take it a few minutes. I'm gonna see the data as it comes in. It's telling me at the top that there's pending changes, so it won't let me move forward until my full data cube has been built, which is what's happening right now. And then in just a second, it's going to pull this in, and you saw the very last step, it said detecting relationships. That's kind of interesting. Well, when it opens up, this is what I get. I get a big white screen with nothing on it. And the first question is, how do I even know my data is here? A couple of key points. Over in the field section, I now see those 4 tables that were inside of Excel. And if I expand, I can see the different information, prices, gender, sales. So this is all my data that I had. If I want to actually see the data, I can go over to this tab right over here. The top tab is this canvas that we're looking at. The second tab allows me to go click into these tables, and there's the actual data, all 858,000 rows of data. They're all right here, just like I was opening a big Excel spreadsheet. So that's cool. I can see the data. I can visualize it. I know it's there. Then this bottom tab is the model. This is where my relationships come in. And you saw the last step when it pulled it in was detecting relationships. What it did is it figured out based on like color ID, and then it looked at the color table and found an ID tag, and it said these two are most likely related. So when I'm doing one, color ID and colors probably relates to the color ID. Actually, that should be color ID here. Huh, that is messed up. Let's look at that again. See how ID is mech to ID, and that is not the way this is supposed to be. Fortunately, Microsoft gives us a way around that, and I'll show you that here in just a second. I'd love to say that was part of the demo, but that actually was a screw up. So if I go back up to my tables, there's a tag here that says manage relationship, and this will give me a text view that says color ID. The ID table in colors is mapping to the sales ID. And I say, well, that's not right. You got that wrong. Let's edit that. And so I say the color ID, so colors table ID should go to the sales table, but I want it to map instead of the ID, I want it to go to color ID. So you see how it's graying here and graying here. And now I'm setting up a relationship one to many, one color to many different sales of those particular colors. And I say, okay, and now it's fixed it. Let's do the same thing for reps. Reps, I have to go back in here. It's interesting. This is the first time this has ever missed. So it's good that we caught it, because otherwise we would have got some really weird data. The rep ID is equal to, and then I got to go out here and look for the sales rep ID. That's named wrong, but that's it. The sales ID or sales rep ID to the ID. I say, okay, that looks good. And the store ID to the store ID. So that last one is okay. So this is just a double check to make sure our relational tables are set up correctly. I'm gonna go ahead and close that out. Now, if I go back and I click, you'll notice color ID to color ID, and I click here, store ID to store ID, rep ID to rep ID, or sales ID, right? So that'll help fix that and make that work. So this is how a flat file database automatically gets converted into a relational database. And I've done this, Bob, you have to correct me, but I think we've done 64 different training events. A large majority of those have been Power BI, and this is the first time it's ever missed.
Yep.
So I think a new update might have messed it up a little, but good to double check. Always good to make sure we're in the right place. So that's how I know my tables are in. Let's start getting into the meat of this thing. Let's make this thing work. I've got 7 years worth of data. I've got 16 retail stores that have been selling tons of shoes. So the first thing I want to do is go to this canvas, and anywhere on this page, what Microsoft wants you to realize is any object that we put on this page will be related to every other object that we put on this page. And I can create multiple pages down here, page 2, page 3, page 4. Each page relates the objects within it together, and you'll see why that makes sense in a second. So just like I would do in Excel, I'm going to create a chart. I'm going to pull out the line chart. And just like in Excel, you can grab the edges and make it bigger or smaller or resize it. You'll notice nothing's in here, but you will notice that I have the center section with the fields, and it's asking me when I click on this object, what's the axes, legend, values, secondary values, tooltips, et cetera, et cetera. That is based on the fact that I have the chart selected. If I click back in the empty spot, you'll notice that it completely changes. There's different information. So it's whatever you're clicked on, it's going to ask me to put some data in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a quick sales chart. And along the, I always start with the value. What is the value that I'm actually looking for? Well, in shoe sales, you have a manufacturer's suggested retail price, and then you have the actual price you sold the shoe. So I'm going to grab this actual price, and just like a typical Microsoft deal, I'm going to drag and drop it into this values. Now, right now, it just summarized those 800,000 rows of records, and it's giving me a single dot, which says I sold $87,645,000 of shoes over the last 7 years. Okay, so because that's the only thing I put in here. Well, I want to look at these and I want to have a legend. In other words, I want multiple lines or multiple dots based on the shoe, or based on the store in which I sold it. So I'm going to go down to the store and I'm going to grab this current store and drag it up to the legend. And now you're going to see a bunch of dots, and they're color coordinated: Atlanta, Boston, Charlotte, Chicago. So each one of these, I know that in this particular, I have to pull this out because I can't see the whole deal. It's Philadelphia. So Philadelphia sold, and I can scroll down this list and see how many they sold. I'll show you how to build a table here in a second, but I can see the distance between it. But this is, again, showing all 7 years combined. So what we want to do is we're going to use the axes, and we're going to put the date of the sale date, drag and drop. And now I've got my pretty Excel looking chart that you would typically get used to. Okay. You'll notice a couple of things. First and foremost, I have 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 laid out here. When I dropped the date in, Microsoft automatically, or Adjo magically, as my kids used to say, added in the year, the quarter, the month, and the day. Why? Because it knows that's a date field, and it's smart enough to know that dates have years, dates have quarters, dates have months, dates have days. So right now, I'm just looking at 2010, and you'll notice as I move my mouse, it's going to snap to 2011, 2012, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So I'm going by years, okay? Each chart that I have has these little icons on it, and these are drill down icons. And what they allow me to do is they allow me to go deeper down into the organization. So if I click on this next hierarchy, it's going to drop from years to quarters, then quarters to months, months to days. So watch what happens when I click on this. If I click, instead of showing years, it's now showing quarters. My question to you is, quarters of what year? And the answer is all 7 years, right? So it's still using all the years. This is showing seasonality. So I'm looking at my sales and saying my Q1 sales versus my Q2 sales. For every one of those years, in the view in which I was looking at. What if I go down one more level? We should go to months. So this is now showing seasonality per month. What is the worst month to buy shoes by far and away? Someone give me an answer. Oh, come on. What a shy group. It's pretty
February.
obvious. February, exactly. Now, for extra bonus and for the title of my favorite student, why is February a horrible month to buy shoes? There's actually 4 reasons, and I know this because I used to sell women's shoes to put myself through college. So why is February the worst?
It's after Christmas. There's
Bingo.
Valentine's Day in that month.
Which I will argue to say they're shifting from winter shoes to spring and Valentine's Day. I'll give you full credit for that. What else? There's another reason.
People are paying their taxes.
I'm sorry?
Tax information's coming in, so you're maybe thinking about that instead of.
I have never thought of that, but that makes total sense too. I have to admit, I didn't design that in when I wrote the algorithm. There's 2 more reasons why. One of them I'll give you because it's hard, which is people will buy shoes for holiday parties and they bring them all back in February and say, oh, well, these didn't fit well. And they have nacho stains on them and everything else, right? They were just basically looking for a free pair of shoes, but shoe stores will take them back. But the other reason, the big reason is how many days are there in February? There's only 28.
28 days.
So it naturally has fewer days to sell in than all the others. And we can see that by looking as we drill down. And I can go right back up the stack just as easy. Now, if I don't want to do that, if I don't want to look at the seasonality, but instead I'd actually like to look at the data points between, I can use this little forked version. It says expand all down one level, which means it's going to keep my previous information, but add in the next. So year will add in quarter, quarter will add in month, month will add in day. Watch what happens when I click on this. I click, and now it still has 2010, 11, 12, 13, but in between them, I now have quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. So there's now 4 data marks in between my years, and you can see a lot more detail on what's going on in this thing. Just looking at this, if you were an executive of a shoe company and your group brought you this data graph, what would you immediately start asking questions about?
What happened in Philly?
Yeah, Philly in 2014 fell off the face of the earth, literally just dropped. And in addition, it's kind of hard to see, but like this orange one went way high, higher than it's ever been before, and kept that going and then plummeted off the face of the earth.
Hey,
so,
Mike,
yeah.
question from the group. Can Power BI accommodate fiscal year calendar in the same way?
Yes, it can. And I'll actually show you how to build a date table that will allow you to set your fiscal year at any starting point that you want to, and then reapply all the numbers. It's a really cool feature of Power BI. So hold off on that because I'll get to that real shortly. Okay, so we're starting to see a lot more detail. What if I go down another level? So now I'm going to go down to months. And when I click, obviously you're seeing tons more data. And when I go 2010, here is January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So it's all still there, but I'm just adding in more granularity. Now this is starting to get super crazy, right? Let's see if we can fix this up a little in a couple of ways. By making it shorter, that makes it look like a big batch of spaghetti. But one of the things I told you is anything that you drop on this page links automatically to everything else. By the way, look at this huge drop. Look at this huge drop. We might have missed those if we weren't down in the monthly view because I didn't see those, right? If I go back up a level, they kind of disappear. I see a little one here and a little one here, but I see it in a much more dramatic format when I drive down in here, and I could really start to see some spikes. But it's still kind of spaghetti. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to use this filter or slicer. And if I click and drag a slicer, it's a slicer object that's just been dragged out onto my page. And I'll frame it up nicely so we get a nice looking deal. And it's just simply asking me drag a single field in here. What this is saying is whatever you put in here, I will filter that view by. So let's grab our stores and drag it in here. And there's all my stores. And I could say, just show me Seattle. Ooh, look at that. A huge drop in Seattle. Something horrible happened in 2014. And I honestly did not realize that was going to be the case. So there's one of our Easter eggs right there. No question about it. What about Washington? Something huge went up in Washington that I wasn't expecting. San Francisco, a couple of drops there. Portland. This is a huge swing that seems a little out of place. So I can filter through these. I can even compare multiple cities. So you're going to get ups and downs, right? These are just bad months typically that happened. It's when I see something totally out of the ordinary, like this is way out of the ordinary compared to the standard timeline. And I can start looking at these, and I can even hold down my control button and say, let's look at Vegas, Dallas, Chicago. So now I just want to see those 4. So you can pick and choose and compare. Look how everyone went down. So whatever happened in 2014, stuff just fell off the face of the earth across the board consistently. Let's add in a couple more, and we'll take some of these out. I forgot to hold my control key down. Let's go Chicago and New York. I just want to see, yeah, there's some similar drops. And I bet you part of the reason you'll notice that they're happening right at the end of the year. Why are my sales dropping right at the end of the year?
The holidays.
That's right. We close up. We generally aren't even open the 31st, and the week after Christmas, everyone's on vacation. It's just kind of a dead week. No one's out buying shoes. Now, this is something different, though, right? That's not in December. Something happened in Charlotte in 2016 that we'd want to investigate and see, because that's a huge drop compared to everybody else. So you're starting to see how I can keep building these in, and I don't have to stop there. Let me throw out another one. I'm going to put this one out, and let's say, let's look at the style of shoe. So I'm going to put the, whoops, I threw that in the wrong one. I had them overlapping each other. So let me pull this out here. I'm going to grab style and drag it into that. So here's the different types of shoes: 4-inch flat, cowboy, jelly shoes, riding shoes, snowshoes, etc. I would also want to go in here. Maybe I want to add in gender. I can grab gender and throw it out here. It's boys, girls, and men's. And anytime you drag it out and it doesn't look right, you can just realign it here. So here, a filter. So what if I want to look at women's shoes in Dallas?
What about by year? Because this is a wide range of data.
Yep.
And if you wanted to narrow it down to like a 2-year pattern.
Yeah. So could I put year into a filter? What do you think?
Yeah.
And you can. You're exactly right. So I'm going to grab sales data. They also have a slider that's a horizontal slider when I do years. So I'm going to take sales date. Where did sales date go? Sales date. There it is. Drag and drop it. And you'll see it came out as a slider. And so I really want to focus on what's going on around this period of time, because we went way low to way high, right? Something crazy right around Q4 of 2014. So I'm going to grab this slider, go up to almost 2014. Q4 would be right around here. Oh, I guess Q4 would be in the December timeframe. So right there. And slide it in here. And so you could start isolating exactly where you want to, so you can get a much better look into this. Now I'm seeing this huge uptick here around January, but remember, I'm filtering on Dallas and breathable shoes. So why in the world did breathable shoes jump up that high? I don't know. What about 4-inch heels? What about dress shoes for women in the color red in whatever, fashion and design? So you can see how I can build these very quickly and very easily. I can even, if I don't want this data, wow, I am eating time. I got to get going. Okay, I'm going to show you just a couple more things, and then we'll keep moving, because there's just so much to show. But I can even do this as a table. So I'm going to grab a matrix here. That's just like a spreadsheet. I'm going to pop this out. Let me kind of squeeze these in together so we can see a little better. And now with the matrix, I can basically set up almost the exact same table that I have in the chart form. I'll click on the table, which gives me my rows, columns, and values. The value is going to be actual price. The columns themselves are going to be the sales dates. So I'll put those in there, and it should come in with months and years and everything else. And then in the rows, I want to put the current stores. Okay. Now it only comes up with Washington and a total, and the reason why is I have a data filter applied here, and I want to take that data filter off. And now that I took the data filter off, you'll notice all of the dates come in, all of the years come in, and I can see them. And once we have an object in here like this table, just like Excel, you'll notice here's where I tell it what data I want to see. But the second thing is where I go to format it. And one of the things people love to do, I do it all the time, is I apply conditional formatting to my table. Well, what does that mean? I'm going to turn on background colors, and I'm going to go into the advanced control, and I'm going to set this up like a, what do you call it? I don't know what you call it. A color stop sign. So red is bad, green is good. So let me go get a custom color. So green, and I want it to be diverging, so the middles I want to be yellow. So I'm just basically creating a giant stop sign that's going to point me and say, bad, these are comparing every number against the others. And if they're red, they're too low. If they're green, they're way high. If they're yellow, they're kind of average. And if I say, okay, there, I got a heat map. There you go. There's my heat map right there. And the filters still work. That's the coolest part. So if I were to say, show me women's shoes, women dress shoes in Q4 of holiday months, etc., all these tables would instantly adjust themselves. I'll show you one more time. Let's throw out something crazy like the width. And I want to say in narrow width shoes, notice all the data, the chart updated, the text updated, the graphs updated, everything became dynamic. By the way, if I wanted to, the way we typically do this was we would stack rank this based on the total. So now I've got my greens on top, my reds on the bottom. It makes it much easier to look and compare, and I could see some interesting outliers. Here's one. Something Charlotte was going along great, and then 2011, it suddenly dropped off the face of the earth, and then it recovered. But it was only in that particular month. Let's drill in. Let's find out what happened in 2011 that made that occur. So what am I going to do? I'm going to drive down even further. So if I click, here's Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Here's Charlotte, and I look, everything seems fine. So we're going good. And then I go up high. I was like, wow, something really good happened in there. So something around 2010, 2011 really kicked my butt. And so I drill even further. And if I wanted to, I could just go ahead and put that date field up and pull it out. Or I could filter it. I could see exactly where it happened. It looks like August of 2011, I just fell off the face of the earth. And then I had a huge upswing. So if I wanted to, I could really drill in on Charlotte in August of 2011. Does anyone have any idea why Charlotte in 2011 would fall off the face of the earth in August? We could keep looking at it. You are exactly right. There was a hurricane that blew right through Charlotte, Category 4 hurricane. And it turns out people will not go buy shoes in the middle of a hurricane. So it killed their business for a week or so. And then things got back, once the store got back open and the flooding resided, and they got right back to business. So whoever said that, who said that? I'm giving 2 million imaginary points to whoever said that, because that was incredible. You got it exactly right. So there's a weather event, but we wouldn't have figured that out unless we dug. Now here's something really cool. I showed you back in the PowerPoint. Back here, this AI builder is also a part of this stuff, meaning Microsoft has taken all their algorithms, their artificial intelligence algorithms, and they've applied it into this entire stack. Next week, I'm doing one of the coolest Power Apps, Power Automate demos you've ever seen with some really mind-blowing AI. But I want to show you some of that here right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this data that I have, and I'm going to go ahead and publish it. I'm going to click the Publish button. It says, do you want to save your changes? What this is going to do is take my information, and it's going to put it up onto my server or anywhere I want this to go. And I'm going to save this. I'll just save this out as my desktop right now. And this will be class 1. Okay, so it's saving a local copy, and then it's going to publish this out. It says, okay, I've got all these different locations that I can publish to. These are different SharePoint sites that we use here at TechStar. These are, I've got some customer team sites out here that we're working with, different organizations and whatnot. So I can publish directly into those, or it also gives you this one called My Workspace. That's your private one. And this is where, when we're doing work in progress, it's not quite ready to be published. This is where I would put it out to. So I'm going to go ahead and select My Workspace, and it's going to say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and publish this out to your workspace. No one's going to be able to see it until I later decide to publish it out to one of the public sites where they can look at it. And it's going to go move this up onto the online version of Power BI. The online version is very different than this version we're using right here, which is the desktop version. You're going to see some differences, and it's also telling you, by the way, we can create views for mobile layouts. So if you want to create a view for an iPad, you want one for an iPhone or an Android device or whatever, it will custom make it a modern scalable version. So no matter what screen they're looking at, it'll look right, it'll look beautiful, it'll come back exactly the way we want to. By publishing it out into the cloud, the other thing that this is going to do when this gets done, and this is running really slow, I'm kind of surprised. Hopefully I didn't, there we go. But it's going to say success. Do you want to go look at it? But it's also going to give me this thing called Quick Insights. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this. This is part of that AI stack I was just showing you. When I click on Quick Insights, it's now going to run through all of my data through the Microsoft AI algorithms, and it's going to come back and tell me where all the outliers are. Now understand, I didn't explain what my data was. I didn't do anything. It's looking at the data in relation to each other. It understands English. I'll explain that in just a second. And it's coming back and it's finding interesting statistical trends. For example, it's telling me that by far and away, I'm selling a lot more women's shoes than girls, men's, or boys by significant margin. Now, that doesn't surprise me because we carry a lot more brands of women's shoes, but that's clearly something to know if I'm going to be spending my advertising dollar. Not only that, but casual has a more noticeable style of shoe that we sell. So if I'm looking to, have a brochure with different shoes on it that I'm going to try to market, I should probably have the very front shoe be a woman's casual shoe. Why? Because I sell the most of those out of anyone. I can even go down to the point of saying, well, what colored kind of shoe or what information should I look? And I'll scroll down here just so you can see all the different stuff. This was a very quick pass. Excuse me. If we give it more time, it'll go infinitely deep. It'll give me scattergrams and much more information. See, it says a subsite of your data was analyzed and the following instincts were found. And I can wait, give it some time. And when I come back, it'll find all the outliers that are historically outside of the regular pieces of data. I will tell you from my personal experience that about half of this doesn't make any sense or really, isn't all that relevant to me. They'll say that size 12 shoes are really big. Like, yeah, I knew that, right? I mean, why are you wasting my time with that? But it will, on occasion, it will find information that's fascinating. Shoes that suddenly took off and maybe correlated to some celebrity wore them to the Oscars. And the next thing you know, every person on the face of the earth has to have that kind of shoe, right? So it'll catch trends like that. It'll catch, when sales reps are offering ridiculous discounts to their friends, they're basically giving the shoes away to all their buddies. We'll notice that because it'll suddenly be an outlier compared to all the other sales they made. So these kind of analyses will come in and do this. And I mentioned this, that Power BI and that AI stack has the ability to understand English. So I've done no special tricks. There's nothing other than send it an Excel spreadsheet. So there's nothing behind the scenes that I prepped for this demo. This is a brand new feature they just added. I'm going to clear off some of this just so I have some room. You've seen all this. We'll pull this over a little bit. So one of the things they just added, just came out, is this Q&A. And this used to only be in the online, and now they put it in the desktop version. And watch how this works. I'm going to click and drag this in, and it is an opening that goes right to your analytic stack or your Power BI AI stack. And so it says, ask a question about your data. And it says, here, try one of these to get you started. And I can ask a question. I'll say show all suggestions, and it says top reps by number of sales. Okay, that sounds good. Let's start with that. And if I click on that button, it'll actually generate, these are my top reps, and it's showing me the number of sales that they're creating. And I can even go in and say as pie chart, right? Because I want to see it as a pie chart. It understands in perfect English whatever you ask of it. So top 12 reps, whoops, if I can spell, and notice that it's coming up, reps, selling women, let's do red dress. So you notice as I'm typing, it's actually coming in and it's giving me information, and it's actually filling out the form as I go. So if I put in shoes, so these are the top sales reps who were selling women's red dress shoes in 2016, for example. And if I hit enter, it'll go out, and for some reason I didn't have any. So let me take that last part out. I might have goofed it up. So you can see that it's constantly giving me that information. Now, I didn't explain my database here. I never did anything. It has a natural language engine built in. And as long as you use the terms, whatever your terms are for the column headings, and you'll see that it's automatically trying to figure out, it doesn't know what the word selling is. So it has this. So I could actually take that out and I'll get the same answer, because it's like, I'm not sure what you mean by selling. So it's out top 12 reps, women's red dress shoes. Okay. And as long as I keep going in here and it says, okay, I don't understand what this is. Would you like to go define it? So I could go click in here and define this for me. When I was doing demos for Microsoft, one of the last sets I did before I retired in 2008, they gave me a headset with a microphone, and this was the early days of this technology. And we had the entire Olympic database, every medal ever won in the Olympics. And I'd stand up in front of a crowd of 1,000 people with this thing on my head, and I'd take suggestions from the audience. How many left-handed women Austrians ever won the biathlon? And I would literally say that into the microphone, and then behind me, it would be automatically creating the results. And I could say, show it as a pie, show it as a percentage of other athletes, show it as a percentage 1925 compared to 1936. And it would, as fast as I could say it, it would be driving that up there. So this is part of that AI stack that Microsoft has put into Power BI. That's what you're seeing right here, this AI builder. And again, if you want to see a whole lot more of this, even cooler than what I'm showing you, come back to the Power Platform presentation I'm doing next week. I've got some really, I'm so excited because I got it working last night, and it's pretty mind-blowing what it does. But that's a little teaser for next week. But that's part of the bigger Power Platform. But that is a feature that's all built in. Now, point of clarification, and then I'll stop for questions in case you have any. Number one, Microsoft has Power BI, which is the free version, and Microsoft has Power BI Pro, which is the one they sell for $9.99. I want to make sure you understand the difference. Everything I've done so far, with the exception of this Q&A, is all, get rid of that, it's all been just regular Power BI. The Pro version gives you this AI stack that we just talked about, where you could just ask anything of it and it'll give you an answer. And again, no prep, no anything, just load the data and start asking questions, and it'll build all your reports and KPIs and other stuff for you. Number two, it allows you to join discontiguous databases, meaning I have Oracle and I have SQL Server, and when I pull the data, I want them to look as one database. I want to merge from both. I want to do a join, outer table joins from two disparate sources. Power BI Pro, you have to do that. The third and last thing that Power BI Pro does for you is it allows you up to the second updates of your data, where Power BI public version usually takes about 10 minutes for the data to refresh. So if you are in an industry where you need your stock market or whatever, and you need up to the second updates of prices and things, you have to go Pro. The beautiful part of this, though, is even if you're just your regular organization, you can have 5 people in your organization get those pro licenses, use the Q&A, build the cool dashboards, do all of that amazing stuff. And then once they get that done and they publish it, then people who are not pro, who are using the free versions, they can consume. You only need the pro to create. You don't need pro to consume. So use Pro to make your dashboards look totally awesome and get them up. So again, buy a couple licenses for a couple key people who can really crank this stuff. And then when you publish them out, people who are reading them and consuming that data, they do not have to have a Pro license in order to do that. Questions on any of that?
Are there material differences between the online version of Power BI Pro and the Power BI Pro desktop version?
Yes. Now they're getting fewer and fewer. In the early days, and I'll even say a year ago, they were vastly different. They didn't look alike. They didn't act alike. They were really, really far off. Over the last year, and especially over the last 2 months or so, Microsoft has really started putting a lot of these features into the desktop version. You'll notice, though, you can't do the analytics that I showed you where it goes out and finds all those outliers. The only way you can do that is the online version. The online version also has kind of a different interface with what they call reports, pages, and dashboards. I'm not going to spend any time on it because it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's a little bit of a different metaphor than the desktop version where everything is just pages. And we can create as many pages as we want to inside of this.
Once published, the data is static, ? How is the data refreshed?
Great question. So the answer is no, it's not static. You can create static if you want. So oftentimes we'll do a fiscal year to date report and we just want it to be locked with that data set and we'll tell it don't change the data. You can even, because all of this technology is built not only on SharePoint, and SharePoint is OneDrive, and OneDrive, there's a whole lot I could teach you on this stuff because there's quite a lot involved in what Microsoft's doing. But you can actually check in and check out data at various points. And so I build my report. I'm ready for my month-end report. I can lock that database when I publish, and it will not change. And the second I publish it, I can start working on the next month where I'm refreshing and bringing in new data, and it will not affect the one I just published. Or if you wanted to, you could create a dynamic one where you're constantly updating the data. There's a refresh button right up here at the top. And if I allow my users to do this, and you can decide if they will or will not, based on their role and their abilities, they can click refresh and it'll go out and hit the latest store of my data and it'll update it with all the latest and greatest information.
Great.
So you can do it either way.
Somewhat unrelated, can you talk about write back functionality roadmap?
Not today, I can't. It would just take too long. It's a great question, but it would just take too long. And I'm a little worried. I got so much more I got to show you here.
Sure.
So follow up with me afterward. I'll be glad to help you out, point you to resources, etc. I always tell people if I can answer questions for you, I'll be glad to do it all day long. We won't charge for that. If it takes a bit of looking at your data and it takes hours to do, then you got to talk to us about some consulting services. We'd be glad to help you out.
Yeah. Two more questions. Is there a data field dictionary for the Microsoft published reports? For example, Teams CQD, Teams usage report.
I know who that came from because you emailed me before the call. The answer is yes. So what Microsoft is doing by putting this into the Dynamics family, they're able to open all this stuff up. And I know that the person that asked that had a bunch of questions relating to this, and they were using a template for Office analysis, use of Office 365, et cetera. What Microsoft is finding, and this isn't I'm not making a flippant answer, but there's always 10 ways to do different stuff. And just because PowerPoint has a template to do something doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to do it. And in many cases, Microsoft has other technology that just hasn't caught on yet. I'll use a specific example. Delve is amazing. It's part of the AI stack. None of the customer base understands it. They're all kind of afraid of it. It's really creepy because it can think ahead of time and have answers before you even ask the questions, that kind of stuff. And that puts a lot of people off. but other corporations are starting to realize that's solving all my problems. So the short answer is that there's multiple ways to do it. What's best is to sit down with a partner and just say, hey, look, here's what I'm trying to do. Which one would you use? Which tool would you use to build the doghouse? Hammer, saw.
Yeah. No, that leads me to the next question. Is TechStar available to help teach my users and to build custom reports using my data?
No, we're not.
Yes, we are.
I just want to see Bob flip out.
Oh, actually, that was my question. For building public dashboards, are there big differences?
Hold on, was that really your question?
It was really my question.
Oh, okay. Yes, we are available.
Sorry, shameless plug. I should have prepared the audience. For building public dashboards, are there big differences between online and Desktop Pro?
When building, no, because when you publish them, they're all going to come out to online. So it's just which tool you're using to create. You could pass around the PBIX file, but that's not recommended. We use the tool to make the report, and then we publish it. It's all online as HTML. So your consumers will only be looking. But in HTML, in that publishing, I'll do this real quick if I can, since it's already been done once. It should get me up there. I just want you to see that all the interaction is still available and still there. So I'll go ahead and replace this. And in 2 seconds, we'll go up. And this time, I'll actually go out online and show you what it looks like. So you'll see that your users have the full capability and full interaction of everything that you built inside this report. They'll be able to do using a browser only, which is a really cool concept. This is running slow today. I have no idea why.
And Ted commented, I've tried passing the file around. Yeah, not a good experience.
Yeah, definitely not a good experience. Would not recommend that. It is possible. And if your team's small enough, you might be able to get away with it. But what you're going to see here, if I go into my workspace, here's tons of these different ones. You can see we use this a lot. As a matter of fact, if you, and this isn't, trying to make a sales pitch here, but if you do work with TechStar, one of the first things we do is we'll build the team site for you. So 24/7, you can come get your analytics and know, are we on time? Are we on budget? Are we doing what we said we're doing? I mean, it's a great way to manage some of this stuff. Let me pull up one. I think I've got another one here that's a lot more further along and that doesn't have our customer data in it, which would probably be a good idea. And I don't see one. Let me go to my workspace real quick. There we go. So you'll see this is where they have dashboards, Power BI, webcasts, pipelines, you name it. And these are the exact same things. Here are some heat maps we did on color of shoe. So this is the same data you were just looking at. Notice here's the ask a question about your data. So here's where I could click and it says, what is the sum of actual type? What is this? And I could avoid all this and say, how many red women's shoes? It says there's only one red women's shoes because it's thinking I'm asking in color. So I should have prepped that better. But anyway, you can just start typing whatever you want to, and it'll come up, show me the sum of all actual sales for last week. Well, this ended in 2020 or 2016, excuse me. So we don't have any data from last week for, let me just put in a date. 2012. And 12.39 million sales right there. And I could even say by store, right? So now it's pulling up the store. So anything you want, it's all in here. But again, the interface is a little different than what we had. I can go further in here. All my pages are in here. I could go down and I could filter, only show me Chicago. I could go into some geo data I have. I can map by regions, by zip codes, by all kinds of stuff. I'm running a little behind, so I want to show you some cool stuff. But the answer is, this is what they would look at. And what you do is you create pages you summarize together into reports. And when you get the reports loaded, then you upload them, and then they come into the dashboard that can be published online. And so your users will actually be in here, and they can get mapping information. So you can see all the red dots are where my stores are. down to the actual zip codes. I could take area code or zip codes or any information, map sales over that and see that. I could see the stores. I could zoom in on a particular store. So all that interaction is still in there, even though I'm on the website, not in the desktop. All right, let's keep cranking because I want to show you some even cooler stuff. So
about 15 minutes, Mike, so I can see
Yep.
the finish line. We want to be respectful and make sure we get in that survey at the end.
going. So here's what we're going to do. I'll jump over to PowerPoint just to show you this real fast. And I'm also going to steal some stuff. First thing we want to talk about is this thing called DAX. DAX is data analytics, I can't even say it, expressions. And basically what DAX does is it allows you to create new info from your existing info. It's a macro formula. And it's great for doing period to period comparison. So if I wanted to do fiscal year to date, if I wanted to compare one fiscal year over next fiscal year, trailing quarters, all that information, DAX is the perfect model to do that. And the reason why, is DAX changes your data structures without changing the data source. So it allows you to go in and add additional looks at information without ever changing your original source data. We're going to do DAX in a couple of different ways. The first way we're going to do it is this calculated columns. And to save time, rather than type these, I'm just going to copy and paste because it makes my life easier. So here are the sales information. And you see all the information that we have. What I want to know is how much profit am I making on each shoe that I sell? Okay, so I'm going to go back into here, into this table, and in the sales table, I'm going to right click and tell it that I want to go ahead and create a calculated column, a new column. So when I click on this, it's going to come up, it's going to ask me to enter a formula, and I'm just going to paste that one that I had. I just give it any name. So I just said shoe profit is equal to, and then the format it uses is what's the name of the table and the column, and what do you want to do to it, and the table and the column. So I'm saying take all the sum of the sales of actual price and subtract out the sales of the cost of the shoe, and that's going to be my shoe profit. And when I hit enter, what you're going to see, it says working on it. Okay, and then if I go look, I now have shoe profit as a new feature down here. And if I wanted to, I could literally drag and drop this out here, and I could get a chart that says, hey, 60 million in shoe profit is currently what I have. When I clicked into the chart and I clicked on any particular line here, you'll see that this graph is actually moving in with the chart and the data. Actually, it doesn't look like it's doing that. That's fine. But we can go in there. Oh, because the profit's not changing on the total amount of shoes. Look at this, though. If I go back to my table, shoe profit has now added a column, and every single record in the 800,000 records has a new profit margin. They should be different. So let's go down here, 78, 76, 67, 52, whatever the case may be. The important part about calculated columns is it adds to your database. It is physically adding another column into your data structure. Now, it's not adding that into the original database. It's adding it into your data model. The reason we use calculated columns is if we know we're going to be hitting this a lot, I want those calculations to be baked ahead of time. So I just want to add it to the database. So my database gets larger, but my speed gets faster because it's already done all those calculations for me. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'll compare that to something we call new measures. Measures are the exact same concept, but it doesn't write it to the database. It does it all on the fly. So what a measure does is it uses the same DAX formula. So I'm going to grab this one. And this time I'm going to go back into my tables and I'm going to right click. And instead of making a new column, I'm going to make a new measure. So I say new measure and I'll just paste in that formula. It's the same thing. Average sales price is the average of my sales actual price. And so I'll go ahead and create this and say, okay. And now it's only doing this on the fly, meaning it does it at the time I run my command, not at the creation or not at the writing to the database level. So there you go. Now I've got an average sales price. Well, what if I go back in here? I grab this chart. You remember we've been using actual price. What if I use my average sales price and drag it in? And you'll see, let me get rid of this so we can see this a little better. And I'm going to go back up my stack to make this line a whole lot easier. Okay. These are my average sales prices jumping up and down. Where I see really low average sales prices, I'm starting to wonder if maybe some store employees were giving away too many discounts or doing something. Where I got really average sales prices, that's where people were actually paying above the typical margins that I would have in shoes. So I was able to create an entirely new metric on the fly using a DAX formula. And once I have it, I can apply it in really fast, really quick. Let me show you. I'm going to give you my notes again. If you will do me the favor, take 2 minutes, if at all, just to tell me how I did today, because that really helps me make this better. But anyway, if you'll do that, I will give you this. And in the notes section, so we go to my notes page, you'll see that I've got a bunch of formulas, and you're going to see a really big one here when we talk about date functionality in a second. But I'm going to grab this one. This is an amazing feature, and let me show you how it works. I'm going to go back to what we had before. I'm going to take my average price, and we discussed that this looks good, but you see how hard it is to tell who's doing what in here. They're getting really close together, and even if I zoomed in, some of these are overlaying each other, and I can't really tell. Well, I'm going to create a new measure. We go right, new measure. Remember, measures are created on the fly, and this one is called the rank. And I'm using this function called rankx. And basically what it says is take all the stores, compare them to all the other stores, and calculate where they rank on their sales actual price in ascending order. So watch what happens when I click OK. So it creates a new metric called rank. And now instead of using the actual price, I'm going to grab the rank and drop it in. And now look how nice and clean it is. So now I can easily see who's moving up and down in comparison to each other. I don't know if there was a dollar difference between these two or $100,000 difference. I just know in the total ranking, my 16th, whatever store came in at 16, they're my best store. Whoever came in at 1, they're my worst store, right? And you can see my worst store is consistently my worst store up until 2015. And then something happened. Maybe they got a new manager or a really good sales rep. They jumped up 4 spots. That's excellent. So you see how using a rank formula with a DAX expression, I can now relook at the entire spreadsheet, and now I can really see my movers and shakers and what's happening in my data. And if I do the same thing, now that I have it by rank, let me go in here and I'm going to drill deeper into this data, and I'm going to go by quarters. And now we really start to see something moved crazy around here. Oh, by the way, that's Charlotte. That was the hurricane that we discussed, right? And then I could go even further in and keep drilling, and you could get to some data. You could see very quickly where those outliers are and what happened here and what happened here and really what happened here, and just go in and drill down to the infinite degree to get to the core part of what that data is showing.
Jennifer commented, it looks like a great piece of art.
Yes, exactly. Looks like the electrical cable of network cabling in my house right now.
I think this
All over
kind
the
of
place.
helps with any store closures, right? If there's not doing good.
Yeah. When I was at Microsoft, I spent all my time. I did analysis for the executives at Microsoft, and some of our analysis from my team and work that I worked on actually made it into Bill Gates's book, Business at the Speed of Thought. In chapter 2 of that book, he talks about we were doing events, and we're asking how far would a customer drive to come to a Microsoft event. And what we discovered when we did the analysis was it had nothing to do with distance. It had everything to do with time. So in Boston, Massachusetts, they wouldn't drive even 15 miles because that was an hour in Boston traffic. In Wyoming, they drive 110 miles because that was an hour in Wyoming, right? Where they can drive above the speed limit and do whatever they want. So anyway, that analysis fascinated Gates so much he wanted it in the book. But that's how you do this. I would sit down with the data and I would just start playing and twisting and spinning and asking questions. And those of you that do this for a living, you know every question leads to 5 more questions and 5 more questions, and you just keep going until you completely exhaust yourself. We had to do it manually with just Excel stuff. Now to be able to create these kind of visuals just by clicking on buttons, throwing out different objects and deciding how you want them to look. I want a donut chart. I want a tree map. I want a line cluster column chart or regional chart or whatever you want. You just keep clicking on these and it'll adjust your data in any way, shape, or form to exactly what you need. I've only got a few minutes more, so I want to kind of go back, make sure I didn't forget any major topics. So, oh, date tables. Holy smokes, almost forgot date tables. All right, so let me just jump in. So we're going to use what's called an M query. Now, the idea, someone already brought this up and they teed it up beautifully, which is what happens if my fiscal year doesn't start at the same time as everybody else? And we saw that the date table, when I threw it in here and I looked, it gave me year, month, quarter, and day, but nothing more. I want to go even deeper than that. Well, Microsoft supports multiple languages. They support DAX, they support R, which is a statistical graphical language, and they support M. And I'm going to show you some M real quick. The way it works with M, I'm going to go get data, but I'm going to create a blank query. And so when you create a blank query, it comes up with a Power Query editor. It comes up with a blank page. And in particular, to get into M query, I need to go to the advanced editor. And this lets me put in custom code using M code. Now, I'm going to give this to you if you fill out your evaluation form. But what this is it's creating a date table. And if you see it listed out and you just read through it, it just makes total sense, right? Create me a date table, add a column with this insert week-long name called period, blah, 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 and et cetera, et cetera. Don't have time to go through all this, but I'll simply say done. When I do this, it'll pop up and say, when do you want the start date of your date table to be? I go back as far as I want to, but I know my data actually starts on 1/1 of 2010, 8? I don't even know. I think it's 2008. 2008? Wow, I should know that. End date is going to be 1/16 or 12, excuse me. Oh, I totally see. I'm rushing and I screw up. 31/2016, and 16 minus 7 is going to be 8. So that is correct. Culture allows me to put in other cultures, Hebrew, Arabic, etc. By default, it'll go into English. I'm going to say invoke, and it just created this date table for me. And if you look, it's figured out each of the days, and that gives a year, quarter of the year, month of the year, financial year number, financial year, etc. You can go into this formula incredibly easy and say, my fiscal year starts in August or September 12th or whatever, and it'll actually recalculate everything based on what you tell it. This is just a standard one. I'm using the default. Day of the week, number of day of the week, number, and it just keeps going on and on and on. And once you have all this done, I do need to go in here and I do need to apply some of those transform issues, because you'll notice, like if I click here, it says this is a date type. Quarter of the year is any. Well, that should actually be a whole number. And month of the year should be a whole number. So you're going to spend just a little bit of time. Remember, though, it's tracking these steps over here. Financial year, I want this to be a whole number as well, because I want to be able to compare these years. This is going to be text format. So I'll change this over to a text format. And I'm not going to do all this right now because it'll just take too long. But I want you to see that you have the ability to then go in and specify exactly how this data comes in. Once I'm done, I say apply and close. It's now going to incorporate a brand new table in called invoked function. Well, that stinks. So let's go in here and rename this, and we'll call this date table. There you go. And so now it's renamed date table. And if I go in and look at my relationships, I now want to add in my date table. And so I'm going to manage them. And I'm going to say, let's create a new relationship between my date table and the date with my sales table and the sales date. So I'm marrying these two up. Once I do that and I say, okay, they're now locked together. And now when I go back in, and you'll see all the extra data in here, because now I'm looking at it on 26, 27 different dimensions here, different than what I had before. Now, if I go in here and instead of using the sales date that I grabbed from the sales table, I can go into my date table and I could say, for example, day of week or day of month or financial month or whatever else I want to, and I could reapply all this data in whichever way I want to, whatever order I want to, and have it come out correctly.
You'll notice time, Mike.
Okay, last slide, and I will finish this up, but I do want to show you very quickly in a big summary. First off, thank you for attending. I know your number one feedback is you're going to want more. There's only so many hours in a day, though. But I'm going to jump down to the end here. I want to finish with the what can we do for you? The dashboards are only good as your data. And so if you need help organizing data pools, data lakes, working with SQL, working with Oracle, we have DB2 specialists on staff. We can help you. If you need to move your data to that common data service, which a lot of customers are asking for, we can do it. If you need special help with DAX, M, and R queries, we got a customer right now who wants to hire us to come in and teach them more advanced versions of those queries, help their teams build them. Developing solutions with Power BI data. We teach classes on both Power BI and Power Platform. And lastly, but not leastly, migrating your databases online out to the cloud so they're more readily available. We do all of that work for you. Bob would love to talk to you. I'd love to talk to you. We're not high pressure sales guys. We won't beat you up. We won't annoy you. But I do want you to realize that's what we do and our specialty in helping you get that done. With that, I will do this. I'll let Bob wrap us up. And then once he's done, I know I went just a minute long. I will stay on and answer any technical questions I didn't get done if you want to stick around and ask them.
So you might be asking yourself why TechStar. TechStar, we believe in combining technical expertise with certified trainers, just like Mike. So trainers like Mike will be part of any projects that we do. We believe the best customer is an empowered and educated customer. So that is a real game changer for our clients, and we'd love to be part of for you to be part of the TechStar family. So yes, as he mentioned, if you would need us to help develop reports, move to the Power Platform, the exciting news that just came out this week is that Microsoft is providing funding to help partners like us assist customers like you. So for those customers that say, hey, I want to adopt more Microsoft services by educating my users and developing more reports, we can go back to your Microsoft rep and say, hey, this company wants to adopt more services. Microsoft, would you pay for all or even part of the TechStar fees to do that? So that's been very exciting. It's their new fiscal year, and those funding buckets are now available, and they should be available for probably the next 2 months.
It's worth calling out too, because some people are like, Microsoft's already done that. Actually, this year they've totally changed it. They cut way back. They're not funding near as much. Bob has done some excellent work to leverage our Microsoft relationships and get us in and find some of those funding options. But if you talk to other partners, you're going to find that Microsoft has dried up a whole lot of those buckets and has changed the way that partners can engage. So if you're interested in that, talk to Bob. He can go find that for you and help you out.
Thank you all very much. We're going to post the survey in the chat window, and we'll also be sending it out via email. We'd love to have some more follow-up conversations. Thanks, everyone.
And I'll stick around and answer any questions. Yep.
Thank you, guys.
You bet. Thank you for coming.
Don't forget, anyone who fills out the survey will get a link to this recording.
Which I probably should stop now.